Good morning, folks. Welcome to Pre-Money Miami. Thank you all for getting up. I know many folks may have had a good time last night at the bar. I saw some of you out there a little bit late. But big thank you to the Knight Foundation and the Simpkins Family Foundation for being our sponsors for today. Thanks very much. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dave McClure. I'm the founding partner of 500 Startups, and we're here to find out what's happening in venture in Miami, and I hope you guys all get a chance to say hello to each other. Quick thank yous to our other sponsors. Platinum sponsors are Rackspace, SoftLayer, and SendGrid. Our gold sponsors are Amazon Web Services, PayPal, Samsung, and Xero with an X, and our silver sponsors .co Internet. That's a local company here, and Gunderson Detmer and Capital One. If you guys want to have Wi-Fi, please feel free. You can grab the Wi-Fi network, which is Kimpton, and then use the following email, which epicwifi@gmail.com is the login for that. That's epicwifi@gmail.com. We have slides for most all of our speakers at slideshare.net/500startups, and we'll be tweeting that out. The hashtags for today are pre-money, so pound pre-money, and also pound 500 strong for us. And we have videos of the talks that'll be archived after the program. That'll be on youtube.com/500startups. If you have any questions about any of that, feel free to grab anybody in the team, and we'll direct you to all that stuff. That clip, I don't know if any of you actually got a chance to see that. That's a clip that was from a documentary called Something Ventured. It's probably one of the most interesting documentaries about Silicon Valley, and in fact, a lot of the people who started things in Silicon Valley 40, 50 years ago were interviewed for that documentary. There are clips there of the Traitorous Eight that came out of Shockley Semiconductor and started Fairchild. Those are the same folks who actually also started Intel, and then pretty much all of the other companies in the Valley. The reason I bring this up is that in a lot of ways, Silicon Valley was kind of an accident. I think if Bill Shockley hadn't had connections to the Mountain View, Silicon Valley area, there's no reason that Silicon Valley would have started there. In fact, a lot of the research that was happening in vacuum tubes, silicon semiconductors, everything was really happening in the East Coast, possibly out of LA. It certainly wasn't really happening in the Silicon Valley area. And so Shockley coming out there and starting Shockley Semiconductor, a lot of the initial studies and people that he collected at Stanford were really almost an accident of history because he happened to be there. And so if you look at kind of the 10 to 15 year trajectory that happened kind of in the late 50s through the 60s and early 70s, that explosion of companies, we see it today happening with, my old alumni PayPal and now Google and Facebook and others. But a lot of those, both startup companies and actually venture capital companies, happened because of Shockley Semiconductor and then Fairchild and then Intel and then a whole bunch of other companies that blew out of that region. Just really, really fascinating story of amazing growth that happened as a result of that, chance of history. And the reason I bring that up is that can happen again. That can happen in other parts of the world. It can happen in other parts of the US. It's really just because of almost random chance where a spark gets started, where that spark keeps alive and keeps growing, that you can create new Silicon Valleys in different places around the world. And we're seeing that in places like Beijing and Bangalore and Sao Paulo and Mexico City and in the Middle East, in Dubai and in Singapore and Southeast Asia. And there's like tens of little Silicon Valleys that are now happening. And some people think that, well, we haven't really duplicated Silicon Valley yet, but realizing that Silicon Valley took about 40 or 50 years to develop, a lot of times we're actually seeing these new Silicon Valleys progress even faster in terms of the relative progress. When you're seeing countries like India add 100 million smartphones every year, countries like Pakistan, Nigeria, Turkey, even Iran, like really, you wouldn't necessarily think of these being emerging market tech centers, but there's 50 to 100 million people in a lot of those geographies that are now coming online. Payments are starting to be easy for people to get started. And these are really forming the foundations of the opportunities for those markets to take off. What is typically missing in those markets is not entrepreneurial talent. There is tons of entrepreneurial talent pretty much all over the world. What is typically missing is seed stage capital and the risk orientation of Silicon Valley angels and investors in other parts of the world. That's you. That's why you're here. That's why we hope that you're here, is want to introduce the opportunity for these regions to get started and not be looking at entrepreneurial talent as the limiting factor, but really the risk orientation and the interest of the investor community, particularly at seed stage, particularly at between $100,000 to maybe $2 million. That's really the critical component in getting those places off the ground.